Hi team, welcome back. This is episode 13, I think. I think I said it wrong on the last episode. My bad. And today I'm talking to James Lee about GLP1 medication. So James is a pharmacist. He's also a strength coach and a nutritionist. I actually met James years ago. We used to work together back when I was in London, and he was probably one of the first PTs I met who was really, really smart. I remember when I was just a baby PT looking at him and being like, that is the smartest guy in the room. I'm going to befriend him because that is how I become a better coach. So hopefully you find this useful. We talk about the medications, what the benefits are, what the risks are, who they're for. We also speak a little about kind of body perceptions and why people might choose the medications, why they might not choose the medications. I think there's a lot of shame and stigma that comes with using fat loss medication, but also I think medication in general. A lot of people see medication as like a shortcut or like an easy out or whatever. And I think that is unfair. And a lot of the time, medication can really be a lifeline for a lot of people to allow them to be able to do other things. A lot of why people hate on medication is, I don't know. I think sometimes a lot of it is just that nobody wants to trust anything. And that's valid to a degree, you know. We are constantly being lied to. Capitalism is ruining society, etc. It's hard to know who to trust. But what has happened, this isn't what we're talking about in the episode. I've gone off kilt a little. Maybe this could be an episode of its own. But I think what's happened is that kind of the wellness industry has swooped on in there and they've been like, medication bad, instead buy these supplements, natural, good, screw big pharma. And the wellness industry is much larger than the pharmaceutical industry. It's like trillions of dollars versus billions of dollars, which might not sound like it really matters because they're both obscene numbers, but it's considerably larger. And a lot of that money is made off frightening people away from medication that will help them into buying things that are completely useless. We see it a lot with like cancer medication, cancer survivors, cancer treatment, etc., where people are convinced to stop taking their medication in place of like natural alternative remedies. For some reason, a lot of the time, these remedies include shoving something up their asses, and then people die because they're listening to the wellness guys instead of to the actual medical professionals. Now, nobody's dying in this scenario. I am obviously not a medical professional, but James is a pharmacist. So I asked him all the questions about GLP-1s. What are they for? Who are they for? What do they do? Are they safe? What are the side effects? What happens when the wrong people get hold of them? How do we mitigate against that happening? And hopefully you find this useful. If you're not particularly interested in weight loss, or if talking about weight loss is in any way triggering for you, you don't have to listen to the episode. I won't be offended. It's all good. But if you do find it interesting, and if you're wondering how these medications work, and if you're wondering if maybe you should consider the medications, maybe this will be helpful for you. I hope that you find it interesting. If you have any questions, James has said he'll answer them. I'll put ways of connecting with James in the show notes at the end. Please do subscribe or follow. Make sure you like or rate the episode wherever it is that you're listening to it. And I will see you soon. James, welcome. How you doing?
Hey, yeah, good, thanks. Nice to see you again. Looking
Nice to
forward to the
see you.
chat.
Thanks so much for your time today. I
No
thought
problem.
we'd get straight into it and let's talk about GLP-1 medications. I think there's a lot of shame around the medications at the moment, and also a lot of like confusion about what they do, what they're for, who they're for. And you're a pharmacist, so maybe you can answer some of them.
Correct. Yeah, I think probably worth just saying, as we talk about like pharmaceuticals, nutrition, and probably something about strength training in this pod. Actually, I'm a pharmacist, nutritionist, and PT, so I feel like I can talk about all these things without stepping out of my lane. I think that's
All
fairly
of the
important
lanes are your lanes.
in terms of actually delivering proper content rather than stuff we see quite a lot of the time on social media.
So let's start with, what's the difference between Mounjaro, Wegovy, and Ozempic?
So there are three types of GLP-1 receptor agonists. I'll talk a little bit about what that is to start with, I suppose, so people kind of understand a bit more about the drugs. So GLP-1 is a hormone in the body, the class of hormones called incretins, which basically help your body produce insulin, and like also help to manage like glucose production in the liver. The receptor agonists are basically like a synthetic version of that hormone. So they're longer lasting in the body, and they basically attach to receptors that this hormone in the body naturally attaches to, and does the same thing essentially. So it allows us to basically produce more insulin, reduce the amount of glucose produced by the liver, has some appetite suppressing effects we can go on to talk about a bit later. And there's a few different drugs on the market at the moment that do this. So we've got Mounjaro, which I think most people probably would have heard of, which is a drug called tirzepatide. It's the GLP-1 receptor agonist, and something called GIP, which is glucose dependent, I'm going to have to say this carefully, insulinotropic polypeptide agonist. So it's like a dual agonist, so that's slightly more effective. Obviously it attaches to two different sites. We've got Wegovy and Ozempic, which are semaglutide injections, and Rybelsus, which are semaglutide tablets, actually, interestingly enough. And there's Saxenda and Victoza, which are the brand names for liraglutide, which is the third one. There are a couple of others, but they're only licensed for type 2 diabetes. And of the ones above, Ozempic and Victoza are also only licensed for type 2 diabetes. So the other ones are licensed for weight loss under certain conditions. So essentially, they're all medications in the same group, but just different drugs that kind of serve the same purpose, essentially.
Do they have different effects, or are they all kind of doing the same thing?
So they're working on through the same mechanisms of action, with the exception of Mounjaro, because that's also got an additional mechanism of action, which is why we do see that being slightly more effective, generally speaking. But the good thing actually about them is that if let's say you don't agree with one of them, if you don't get on with one, you can try another one, because they might respond to the body slightly differently. So there is a bit of flexibility there. I think there is a third one that's in trials at the moment, which is a triple agonist. So it adds another receptor that it works on, which is a glucagon-dependent receptor called retatrutide, but that's not out yet. So there's something else in the pipeline that might also be coming out soon if it's, safe, basically.
Do you know what that third thing would do?
So I think as far as I understand it, it affects basically how much glucagon is released, which is the enzyme that transfers glycogen back to glucose. So if we can manage that, it helps to reduce the amount of glucose that's like released if we don't need it released, basically. That's how I understand it working. But it's like I said, it's in development, so we won't really know until it's all released and out there anyway.
And who are these medications for?
So originally they were designed for diabetics, type 2 diabetics. So they originally released exenatide, which was the first one, was out in 2006. Well, that's when it got FDA approved, but it might have been slightly later in the UK, I'm not sure. So in type 2 diabetes, obviously we have this reduction of insulin sensitivity. The effect of this incretin, the GLP-1 natural hormone, are reduced. So we can see up to like a 50% reduction in efficacy, basically, of the natural hormone. So this drug obviously increases that effectiveness in those people by encouraging more insulin production, basically. So it was initially introduced as what we call like a fourth line drug. So they would have tried 3 other treatments first, maybe including insulin potentially. And this is kind of was the last kind of option, if you like, alongside that. If the other ones haven't worked, normally that's due to it being new and it being expensive. But also because other stuff might be more effective at actually dealing with certain other issues. It was originally, or it still kind of is, recommended if insulin is not appropriate or you've got a high BMI, with additional comorbidities. The kind of side effect of these medications turns out to be appetite suppression, which really supported weight loss, and therefore they started looking at them more from a weight loss angle as well. So it wasn't really the intended use of them, but it's the beneficial side effect of appetite suppression is what's actually become the most powerful use of these drugs, or becoming the most powerful use of these drugs. The dosage we use for weight loss tends to be higher than if we were giving it to a diabetic. And also, I've just made a note on my notes that actually, there's a difference in populations as well as to when it's recommended. So the BMI kind of level is lower, or a threshold for when it can be used is lower if you're Black African, South Asian, like Caribbean, Chinese, or Middle Eastern, just because they have a higher risk of obesity-related health conditions at lower BMIs. So that's just something that's worth mentioning, I think, as well.
Is that when you're getting it through your doctor, or would that be the same as if you're ordering it from online pharmacies?
So you would only be prescribed it for type 2 through your doctor. As we've come through to the weight loss side of things, they've now obviously you're now released into this realm where you can get a prescription for it, provided you meet certain criteria privately. The guidelines are still the same. I think it's a BMI of 30 plus, so obese or overweight with added comorbidities. So if you're in the obese category, I think you can be prescribed it. If you're overweight and you've got high blood pressure or pre-diabetes or risk of cardiovascular disease, then that kind of gives you the ability to get it prescribed as well. So yeah, there's slightly different criteria depending on whether you're diabetic or not. But if you're looking at it for weight loss, you can get it prescribed under slightly different criteria, if that makes sense.
What are the risks of taking these medications for the goal of weight loss?
So, I mean, I think the risks are obviously it's a drug. So anything that you take the drug, there's always going to be a risk of side effects. Most of these side effects are going to be dose dependent as well. So the higher the dose, the higher the risk of these things happening. And also there's a lot of individualization there. They've obviously been seen to be effective and what we'd say acceptably safe treatments. They've been used for, since 2006. So we've got quite a lot of data on certainly the older ones. The newer ones, obviously, the data will come, especially with such a large amount of people using them. Obviously, because they are prescription-only medications, we do need to have proper consultation. We need the prescriber to understand the full medical history so that we can deem if they're appropriate. We can anticipate any potential drug interactions or any allergies or side effects, that kind of thing. Not suitable for pregnancy or breastfeeding. Usually, at this point, probably just there's no data on it. But obviously, there's a few side effects that we can get. We're injecting something, so we can get injection site reactions, potential for allergies in some people, GI issues. As with most drugs, GI issues is normally crops up, but obviously these affect, satiety, gastric emptying, gut motility. So increased risk of things like constipation, nausea, sickness, that kind of things, loss of appetite. Small risk of hypoglycemia sometimes, but that's normally at a dose change or on initiation. You'll find out if that's going to happen. And then we've got, you might have seen people saying, pancreatitis is a risk. Does sometimes happen, again, because it is a drug that does have an action on the pancreas in terms of insulin excretion. So that is a chance that's going to happen. And obviously, again, so many people are using it. We'll see that happening, not frequently, but it does happen. And then again, if you're kind of someone who's got any diabetic retinopathy issues, so like issues with the eye, it can increase those. So this is why we need to have these consultations initially to make sure that it's appropriately prescribed. And so you've got that touch point back if you do notice anything, so you can be properly advised, basically. Interesting note as well, if you're a female, oral contraception efficacy might be decreased when you initiate these for 4 weeks. So you do need to make sure that you're utilizing an extra barrier method or something, or switch to a non-oral form which is less affected.
What do you think the potential risks will be of people taking this medication when they don't actually need it?
I mean, I'm certain it's happening. I think probably less so than we think, but it depends if, this is probably the one area where having the online prescription can fall down, because often you might not have the check-ins that you would have if you were seeing someone in person. So actually, this is where like us as pharmacists who are dispensing the drug can have an impact, as in like we can spot someone who might be like looking like they're low BMI taking it, and be like, maybe you need to consider, speaking to someone about this, signpost them appropriately. In theory, your prescriber should be on track of this. They should be checking your weight and managing it, and telling you whether or not it's appropriate still for you to keep taking it. Obviously, for type 2 diabetics, it's designed as a lifelong drug, but I think there's quite an interesting discussion around that from a weight loss point of view, like how much weight loss is, when are we looking to actually stop taking it? When are we looking to go to a maintenance phase? Whether this is holding the dose steady so that you can maintain your weight rather than consider losing weight, or whether we consider maybe bringing you off the drug, seeing how we're managing off it, and look at the diet side of things and that kind of thing. And you can always come back on it potentially if you need to, if you find that your weight's shooting back up or whatever. So I think there's a discussion to be had there in terms of, is it a lifelong thing or is it a multi-phasic thing? I personally err on the side of the best amount of drugs to be taking is no drugs. So that would be my preference, I think, would be to phase it in and out.
What happens when people stop taking the medication? Does the weight just come back on?
I think the thing to understand about weight loss as a whole is it's fundamentally at the base level down to calories in, calories out, ultimately. So all the drugs do is they suppress your appetite, and from a weight loss point of view, the key reason we're using it is for the appetite suppression point of view. So if that appetite suppression goes, and that suddenly leads you to having less control over food and eating more, then your weight will increase again. If you come off it and you've used the time while you're on it to build really good habits for your dieting or your eating, and you're understanding kind of the impacts and taking the time to actually develop that side of things, which is, as we talk about as nutritionists, it's what we talk about with someone who isn't on the medication, you're going to have a much better chance of maintaining, your current weight there or thereabouts. Obviously, as when we come off a diet, initially weight's probably going to come back up a little bit, just because we're probably going to eat a little bit more, adaptive thermogenesis happens as we eat a little bit more. So all these sort of things, calories will go back up. We might put on a little bit of weight. We just don't want unrestricted weight regain, I think, is probably the goal.
I guess that's the tricky part of having kind of an extreme approach to weight loss, is that if you've ended up in a situation where you have gained a lot of weight, it's not because you don't know calories in versus calories out as a concept. It's because life stuff happens, and at some point you weren't necessarily able to control all of the things. So then I suppose whilst taking the medication, there needs to be something else as well, some kind of other support for people, so that they're also working on the emotional and the mental side of all the stuff as well. Because the skills you need to be able to maintain weight are similar but different to the skills you need to be able to lose weight. And if you're getting an assist with the losing the weight, you also still need some kind of assist with the maintaining of the weight. And if as soon as you stop taking the medication, you also stop having any contact with your doctor, or if along the way you never got any help from like a nutritionist or whatever, what are you meant to do? You're just kind of out there on your own.
Yeah, so I think it's the people who will do the best are the ones that take this holistic approach, basically what you just discussed there, of like actually dealing with asking the questions of why more often. Like, obviously if we look at the kind of the injection like a bit of a cheat code, essentially like it gives us free appetite suppression without really having to do anything or think, often reduces food noise quite a lot without having to do anything. So actually, even if there are cakes there, we might not be like, I want a cake. Whereas beforehand, you might just grab a cake. Do you know what I mean? Like those things are suppressed often. And suddenly if you remove that and they come back, have you dealt with that on like a psychological level or a social level or whatever? So actually I think people need to also do the self-awareness thing when they're on these medications, ideally, of thinking, what do I need to focus on, or what could I focus on to improve my outcomes if I don't want to take this medication forever? Because the reality as well is that they're expensive. So, spending £200 or £300 a month may not be feasible long term for everyone. So you might be forced to come off it because of that, feasibly. So I think it's quite important to actually look at it holistically. Go to the gym, that's really important. Do some resistance training. That's obviously massively important for retention of muscle mass. So you see people losing up to 30 to 40% of their muscle mass. They do nothing sometimes. 30 to 40% of the weight they lose can be muscle mass. So quite a significant amount, which, especially if you're in older populations, that's really significant. So there are quite a lot of factors, I think, that need to be considered, not just stab myself, forget about it, lose weight.
The loss of muscle mass is incredibly important, especially in those older populations, because we know that in older populations, if people are a bit fat but also a bit strong and they fall, they're much more likely to be okay than the people who aren't fat but also aren't strong. Or even if they're the same amount of strong, the person who's got a bit more fat on them when they fall is more likely to be okay. The way that we as a society kind of idolize thinness can put a lot of people in danger of ending up being too thin and sacrificing that muscle mass in pursuit of like extreme ideologies that ends up not being healthy anymore. The goal isn't to be like as skinny as possible. It's to get to a place where you're healthy and you're strong and that you're able to like be resilient as a human being,
Yeah, massively. I think that that's a whole discussion in itself, isn't it? The kind of health versus weight loss interplay. And actually, can you, if we want to maximize, I'm going to say optimize, even though it's a bit of a nonsense word for these things. Health, we want to be strong. We probably don't want to be massively obese. We need to be active and have a good cardiovascular system, and all these things, have a good diet. They all play in together. There's quite a lot of things to consider. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, actually, the last thing you want to do is go from being slightly heavier and actually quite strong to, ideal thinness, shall we say, for whatever you perceive that to be. But actually now you're fighting this uphill battle because your bone density has got worse. You've lost muscle mass. You're now at higher risk of, actually suffering an injury if you fall or whatever. So you might actually potentially end up in a worse position if you don't pay attention to those things.
Okay, so then what are some really easy things people can make sure that they're doing if they are taking these medications alongside the medication? And I mean, this advice will be useful even if you're not taking the medications. What are things that people can do while they're losing weight to make sure that their bones stay strong and they don't lose any muscle mass?
These are the same advice I would give to people who are on these medications and who are trying to lose weight generally in diet, because the loss of muscle mass when losing weight isn't as a result of the medication. It's as a result of the rapid drop in body weight, which you'll get if we take an aggressive diet, for example. That there's a high risk of that there as well. So actually, this is just good information. And primarily, we want to focus on maintaining muscle mass, which is resistance training. So do some lifting of weights of some form or other. We're talking minimum effective dose is fine. If you get into the gym once or twice a week and do a few hard sets, this is going to be good for you. Protein, as usual, kind of make sure you get a decent amount of daily protein. Also, benefits of that are increased satiety anyway, so that's going to help you, probably from the weight loss side of things anyway. If we're eating enough protein, just in that usual range of sort of the 1.4 to 2 grams per kilo is ideal. Maybe the lower end of that in reality here, if we can't eat much anyway, is fine. They're the absolute key things, I think, to focus on. Make sure we get enough sleep as a priority. If we've got anything left, we can think about hitting our minimum activity requirements of 150 minutes a week or whatever from a cardiovascular health point of view, which is going to be good. And again, if we're on these medications long term, that is something to think about more, because we're going to have to figure out how to fit that all in. Because at some point we're going to, in theory, reach a maintenance point. We're not going to be losing weight forever. You're not going to waste away to nothing, or you shouldn't be trying to. So once you hit that maintenance level, then you can start to think about what we're going to build in that way. But certainly in initial phase, resistance train, eat enough protein, sleep enough. Yeah, they're the key things, I think.
I think when thinking about maintenance, a lot of people end up not doing a very good job of that because they focus so much on maintaining that restriction of calories. But it's easier, in my opinion, instead of trying to keep eating a small amount, is to try and figure out how much more moving you can do that still fits into your day. It's always much easier to walk more or go to the gym more than it is to eat less, especially as someone who's quite small. So like my maintenance calories are very low, and that's not conducive to like interacting with other humans
Yeah.
in the
That's
world.
fair.
If I want to hang out with people, one meal could be a daily allowance for someone my size, and that is lame. I can't be living like that. So a solution I think is more productive is just that, trying to figure out how much more moving you can do that fits within your life, that isn't leaving you shattered, that you're not like hating every minute of, but also maybe accepting that sometimes you'll just go for a run even though you don't particularly like it because you know it's good for you. And it's okay to do things that you don't like all the time.
Yeah, and I also think there's probably a fair point of saying, like, let's manage our expectations here as well. Like, if you're someone who's small of stature, maintaining 50 kilos of body weight in a period where you can go and eat a donut and that's your daily allowance nearly, is like, you might just have to be more realistic and be like, well, I can either socialize and be a little bit heavier and enjoy my life, or I can be skinny and alone. And, like, that's an extreme example, but you know what I mean? Like, it's just the reality of life is if you're an 80 or 100 kilo human because you're 6'4" and a bloke, your life's just easier when it comes to eating and socializing because you've got 3,500 calories to play with a day, not 1,500. So you can literally eat twice as much, which makes, you have that flexibility. So that's something that I think is worth considering, and actually just it's hard to accept sometimes, but that's just your reality that you're going to live in as a person who's small versus someone who's large naturally. And I think also understand that maintenance isn't like a flat line. It's going to be ups and downs, and actually understanding that up and down could be a 5 or 10 kilo shift maybe for some people, of like, I'm going to enjoy myself for a month and it's Christmas, so I'm going to go out for a few things. Great. Weight might come up a little bit. Maybe in January you go, I want to lose a little bit more, so you come back down a bit. And it can fluctuate like that. That's normal, actually. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think people have this expectation they're going to go down here and then they're going to hold their weight dead flat, which, again, it's not really conducive to normal life, I don't think.
I think you're right. And often if you allow yourself to get too caught up in what the number on the scale says, you're just more likely to get distressed about it going up a kilo or down a kilo. And in real life, that's just going to be happening depending on what life looks like, where in the month you are, what things you've got to do in real life, what you've been eating. Like, there are lots of factors that'll make the weight on the scale go up and down. And it's not something that you necessarily need to be freaking out about, especially when you're trying to figure out what maintenance is, because there's a good chance that maintenance is probably a few kilos heavier than what you want it to be in your brain. And I think learning how to accept that will allow you to have a much more like comfortable life than constantly fighting that line where your body actually wants to just sit more comfortably.
Yeah, and I think, there's an argument for this as well, in terms of if your body weight can fluctuate. I would say maybe 4 or 5 kilos without you noticing any difference, because we've got like gut contents, how much carbs you've had, are you stressed, time of the month, like you said, all these things. Like, if you could gain some muscle mass and actually you might not look that different, but you've gained something over time. So actually the number on the scale can be a bit deceptive, and like it's an all right guide in like a scope out kind of, let's see what's happening. But actually, it's not going to tell you if your clothes fit really well. It's not going to tell you if you feel comfortable in your body. It's not going to tell you if you can wake up and feel good and go for a run. It's just another data point that I think people need to not be so, honed in on, just for a happier life in general, really, if at all possible. Use it as the data and try and, not worry too much.
I think as well, if you're at that point where you are ready to start maintaining, if you're lifting regularly and you feel like you still look more or less the same, but the scale is creeping up, there's a chance that you're just building muscle. And that's good. That's what you want. You want to be building muscle, you're lifting weight. That's kind of the goal. And not freak out because you are a bit heavier. Because if you then try and stop eating to manage that, there's a good chance the first thing you're going to lose is any of that muscle that you just built. And then it becomes counterproductive and you're just gaining and losing muscle more than you are fat anyway.
Yeah, and I think, if you're constantly chasing this downward trend of the numbers on the scale, I don't think it's very healthy, actually. Because I think it's very easy to create that obsession. You see it with like fitness trackers. I'm a bit like in my watch. Like, I'll do loads of running and you see the data going like this, and you stop for a week because you're doing stuff, and it starts going like that, and you start to feel guilty that you've not been for a run or whatever. And it's like, this isn't a great way to do it. I want to do it because I enjoy it and because it makes me feel better, not because I'm obsessed with the numbers.
It's really easy to become all consumed with these things. Like when I was a teenager back in the early days of the internet, I've always had very disordered relationship with food, and probably technically an eating disorder, if we're being honest. And when I was a teenager, I ordered diet pills from Australia because they had speed in them, which you couldn't get in the UK, but you could have them posted. So then I was just taking those, and it meant I wasn't eating because
just on
there was
amphetamines,
speed in it and there was no appetite. And I lost loads of weight and I looked quite ill for a while. And like, had it not become harder to order them online, I don't think I would have. The only reason I stopped was because it was hard to get hold of. And I think even with the best of intentions, the easier something is to get hold of, the more easy it becomes for people who don't necessarily need it, but who have something in their soul and in their brain that's like telling them that they do, even though they don't. It's just more likely that they'll go and they'll buy it. And I want anyone listening to this to like, I guess, be aware of that and know that, yeah, there's no shame in using these medications if you do need them, but also fat loss isn't the only thing that matters in the world. And you don't have to feel like that's the most important thing that you need to do it. Even if you are an obese person, like it still isn't the most important thing in the world. And everyone should be free to make those choices of their own accord, but with all of the information available to them without feeling like they're being pushed in any of the directions that exist.
Yeah, I think that's a super important point, actually, of like, we're here as coaches and pharmacists, nutritionists, whatever, to provide information to allow you to make an informed decision based on what you want. That's kind of it. Like, we'll guide you through the process if that's what you want. But ultimately, your body, your choice, right? Like, that's entirely valid. But just make sure that the information that you've got to draw on is actually good information and covers all the angles. So, I think these drugs are really powerful and they can be really useful, but there's not 100% positives to it. There's obviously going to be a small group of people that they're just not appropriate for a lot of the reasons that you've potentially mentioned there. I think it's also super important to not be buying stuff on the black market because it's cheaper. There's a reason the regulation exists. There's a reason why it's a prescription-only medication. It's so that these safeguarding kind of feedback loops are in place, and also so that you're guaranteed what's actually in the thing, because you're injecting something into your body. You don't want to be injecting random stuff. There's cases where like the black market stuff has just got insulin in it, which isn't great if you don't know how much insulin's in it, because you'll have a hypo and it can kill you, or you'll go and train and you'll have a hypo and pass out in the gym. So it's really not a good idea. There's just a reason why it's hard to get hold of.
I've seen a lot of natural alternatives springing up, and as soon as I clicked on one, I started getting loads and loads of adverts for loads of other ones that are like GLP1 alternatives, or they'll be using GLP1s in their marketing. Then there'll be like natural versions or cheaper versions, but then a lot of them, I'm not convinced were actually anything, and they're just trying to trick people. If someone is like genuinely looking for medication to help them, I want them to not accidentally end up wasting their money on these alternatives. So can we talk a little bit about these like natural alternatives? Are they safer? Do they work?
There's a couple of probably points here. I guess one is supplements and one is, I'm going to say, natural drugs. The only way you can't sell a supplement is if it causes harm. That's the only reason you can't sell a supplement. It doesn't have to be proven to be beneficial. It doesn't have to be proven to have done anything. You can sell a supplement and say it does something. As long as it doesn't cause harm and it's a supplement, that's fine, which is mental, I think. But that's the reality of it. A lot of these people that like, oh, it's a GLP1 blend. The hell is that? Like and you look at it, it's like tea extract and like just like stuff like that. You're like, great. Even if it does do anything and increase your natural GLP1, that gets broken down really fast in the body anyway. It's not really going to do anything. The reason this synthetic stuff is really good is because the half-life is really long. So you get that constant suppression and, take the jab once a week and it works because it gets broken down slowly. If you see something that's a GLP blend in it or increases natural GLP1, it's going to be an expensive gimmick. I haven't seen anything that actually suggests that it's definitely efficacious, and certainly not as efficacious as the clinically tested drugs that are designed for this thing. There's a reason they're used, and there's a reason they go through extensive testing to prove that they're better than placebo. That's why they're so prevalent and so effective. So I think that's quite an important point to make. I think when it comes to, plant-derived compounds and stuff, I assume you're probably referring to like berberine and stuff like that. They have been seen to have effects in people who have metabolic conditions already. I was just looking at berberine because it's not something that I've particularly come across personally. But I had a look on examine.com, which is a really good website if you're unsure about any supplements or anything, just for people generally to have a look at. So it does act to enhance glucose uptake by cells, increases insulin receptor expression and mitochondrial function, so thereby kind of improving insulin sensitivity to a degree and kind of therefore managing blood sugar levels a bit better, which may help if you've got issues with your metabolism, like you've got type 2 diabetes already or like you've got PCOS already, where those things are an issue. From the evidence that it seemed like they had there, it's very limited and inconsistent as to if that's actually beneficial to someone who doesn't have a metabolic condition already. Whereas, again, coming back to the GLP-1 drugs, they do have an impact, markedly, improvably, reliably, on people who don't have metabolic conditions but are just overweight. Other things to consider with like these plant alkaloids, which essentially they are, is berberine especially is an enzyme inhibitor. So if you're taking other drugs, they can affect them to the point at which, when we say enzyme inhibitor, it basically means it normally affects the enzymes that would break the drug down. So in this case, it's an enzyme group called CYP, which is quite a common enzyme group that breaks down quite a lot of drugs. So potentially, if you're on certain drugs, the blood levels of those drugs can increase potentially to dangerous levels if you're not aware of this. So there aren't not risks of utilizing kind of natural products, because they do have drug-like effects. I think people just like to think, oh, it's natural, therefore safe, which isn't necessarily true. So again, the sort of thing that you should chat to a medical professional about before considering taking supplementation, especially if you're on other medication. I don't know how much the regulation is with these drugs if you buy them over the counter, as in like from Holland & Barrett or something. I'm not sure if they have to be provably containing the amount of stuff in them that they say they do. I don't know what the quality is. They're probably not batch tested or quality approved. So actually, I would say it's probably not worth it unless you can really highly define the source, the quality, all that sort of stuff. You double checked with your medical prescribers, or it's recommended by your medical provider as to a dose and stuff like that. And that goes for most natural remedies, especially if you're taking other medications. We have to be quite mindful of these side effects or interactions that can sometimes happen that we might not expect as a lay person.
So hopefully anyone listening, if you're thinking about weight loss drugs, maybe just go to your doctor and don't buy random weight loss medication from an Instagram advert, because the chances are that might not actually contain anything. Best case scenario, nothing useful. Worst case scenario, maybe it makes your existing medication not work anymore.
And also not cheap. I think I had a look at that. It was like 130 quid for a packet of this stuff,
That's crazy. You may as
which
well
was like, I
actually
don't know
just
how
buy
long it
some
lasted, maybe
Manjaro.
like 2 months or something. But it's not worlds apart from starting the medication, for example. It's also way more expensive than not doing either of those two things and focusing in on your nutrition a bit more, or that kind of thing, and trying the non-medicinal route first. I think we probably have to be aware of. Yeah, I'm not saying definitely take the drugs. I'm not trying to push it. It's very much like, again, these are the potential benefits and why they're useful, but also the original stuff of managing your nutrition, if you can get a handle on it, does work really well. Like, we can see a lot of aggressive dieting strategies, when implemented properly with the help of a decent practitioner, have similar outcomes, actually, to the use of the drugs. But again, it's just an appropriate use of the tools we have available on an individual level, really.
Do you think the potential side effects of GLP-1 medications would be less than the potential side effects of something like bariatric surgery?
Good question. I don't know, because I don't actually know what the side effect ratios are of like bariatric surgeries. Obviously, you have to have surgery, which is quite a big downside. So recovery, I think sometimes they're non-reversible as well, and they don't always work either. So gastric bands don't always work. I think a knee-jerk reaction would be to say you have more risk of acute side effects from surgery, infection risk, obviously going through a surgery, it not working, that kind of thing. As I understand it, I would guess the surgery is a last resort kind of option if this hasn't worked, the drugs haven't worked, lifestyle change hasn't worked, and you're still either gaining weight really fast or it's really impacting your psychology. Again, potentially the surgeries are an option, but again, that's something you need to discuss with your doctor or
I
consultant
know
or
a few
whatever.
people who've had gastric band surgery and ended up with other health conditions connected to them no longer being able to absorb
Yeah.
nutrients from the food that they're eating anymore. And I guess taking this medication won't stop your ability to absorb the nutrients. I'm assuming
No,
maybe you can't absorb nutrients this way either.
no. So obviously the surgeries, especially they do I think it's the bypass that causes the issues with the absorption, because it cuts out a bit of that small intestine bit where a lot of it absorbs, as I understand it. Um, so that can obviously cause issues. But again, with these drugs as well, you've got the reduction of gastric motility. So there are things to consider here. With, if you're not eating many calories because your appetite suppression is actually really pronounced, and let's say you're only eating 600 to 800 calories a day, which isn't unfeasible. Fiber is going to be a challenge to get in. Micronutrients are going to be a challenge to get in. So there are similar things to consider, but we can normally deal with them with a multivitamin or specific supplementation. We can take extra fiber supplementation if we want, like fiber gel or asparagus husk or something like that, to combat those issues fairly easily with the GLP-1s, I would say, which may be more problematic with the gastric band stuff or the surgeries, I would expect. Again, not my area of speciality, so I can't really comment on it with any authority.
I saw this study looking at motivating factors for people wanting to take the GLP-1 medications for weight loss. And the study found things like anti-fat bias and body image and a history of weight loss were all related to somebody's desire to take the medication. And they found that positive body image could mitigate the desire to take GLP-1 medications. What are your thoughts on all of that?
I think that makes sense. I think if you're happy in your body, you're not going to feel a need to change. In those people, I would expect the only reason they would end up taking this stuff is if they suddenly developed a diabetes or a pre-diabetes or something where they were advised to, maybe it is a good idea if you lost 15% of your body weight. This is the easy way of doing it. That's how it should be. I think in an ideal world, that's kind of how it should be utilized, I think, as a way to maintain a healthy weight, without having associated negative psychological impact, so to speak. I just don't think that's a reality given human nature, social media, societal pressure. So I think it's important that we try and foster positive body image. as much as possible. Focus on being strong, feeling healthy. We can track blood markers and all this sort of stuff if people are want to go down that route. So you can see if they're kind of like healthy in the moment, but also having an understanding of like the impacts down the line of higher body weight and the kind of increased mortality risks, all that sort of stuff. It comes back to, I think, again, giving everyone the information and letting them make a decision. But I think there's definitely a risk for people who are more vulnerable to tend towards either these medications or whatever measures they need to take or they feel they need to take to get to the body they feel they want.
I saw that some eating disorders were actually on a list of things that these medications were used to actually help treat. So they found that these medications were useful in treating bulimia and binge eating disorder, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
And I guess that makes sense, because if you're binging, you're all of the desire to do that is going to disappear if you've got no appetite and no interest in food. And then I guess if you're purging because you feel like you've eaten too much, that's not going to happen either if you've not eaten very much food in the first place.
Yeah.
And I just find it really interesting that, because it feels like it could be it feels like it could be a place where disordered eating could almost flourish in some people who have those tendencies already. So I thought it was really interesting that it was actually being used to treat certain eating disorders. And I wonder, I couldn't find any research on this, so I don't know what the answer is. But I wonder how helpful it actually is in those people with bulimia and binge eating once the medication stops and they go back to normal, if that time was long enough to, like, I guess, figure out what you're doing so you can like recover from that.
Yeah, I wonder if it's an interesting one. I wonder if they use it again, because it can be used lifelong. So I wonder if it's like, was it implemented as a long-term strategy or as a short-term strategy as like an adjunct to the other therapies they probably would have to go through to manage it?
I guess it would have to be alongside the other things, right? Because for eating disorder recovery, really for good success, there needs to be like the therapy side of things, and like
definitely, yeah, I would say so. It's quite a complex issue, isn't it?
Otherwise, you're just kind of out there swimming in all the things by yourself, which I think is really difficult.
I would imagine that in that scenario, it's something that's implemented by a specialist within the realm of their specialism. I would expect them to do all their due diligence and find out who it's appropriate for. And assuming that the person you're speaking to is telling the truth, which is also a factor, you'll be able to say yes, no, or go and speak to this specialist.
In conclusion, if you're considering these GLP-1 medications, what's a quick summary for those people?
You can go and probably have a chat to your local pharmacist. Is a good shout. A lot of them also do prescriptions now. I would recommend chatting to someone face to face. Obviously, you can do the online route, but again, make sure it's someone that's got a consultation process that's effective, or speak to a GP. That can be quite good. There's a lot of information online. If you go to like NHS England or potentially even like Gov UK website, there's a couple of interesting things about who's eligible for it, what the criteria are, side effects, all that sort of stuff is laid out there. I would go to those sort of reputable websites rather than finding it somewhere random. Do that first, and also have a think about why you think you want to use it. Because whilst it does make the process easier, again, that reflection is quite important. I think of like, is it because you want to make sure you're healthier? Is it because you just want to be thinner? Is it because you're feeling like someone's told you need to be thinner? That kind of thing is quite important for anyone who's looking to lose weight at all. Actually, that kind of continual self-reflection of the whys and the am I feeling better as a result is quite important. That
continual self-reflection is probably a really useful thing to do in most scenarios for everyone all of the time. Whatever it is that you're working towards or you're thinking about, spending some time on a regular basis, just checking in with yourself can be a really useful way to guide you through these decisions and make sure that you're not making rash decisions, I suppose, and making sure any decisions that you're making them because that's actually what you want. But also spending that time, I think, can help you figure out good ways of doing stuff as well. So then while you're sat there thinking, oh, okay, do I want to lose weight because of health reasons, or because for aesthetic reasons, or because somebody's told me to, or whatever. And then you're like, no, I want to do it for these reasons. Okay, what else can I do? Other than the medication, what are other things that I can do? And you can take that time to like give yourself some like guiding paths, I guess, and some targets to aim for outside of calories or medication or whatever, to help you keep doing the thing for as long as you need to without sacking it off.
Yeah, and I think as well, like having a decent support network through the process is quite beneficial. You should definitely have a touch point with your prescriber, so you can always feed back in. But like socially, friends, family, are they going to support you? There's plenty of like groups that you can join. Like the one I spoke to you about earlier that I started on school is a good example, where I'm trying to be there for people if they want to ask questions. There's obviously Facebook groups and stuff, so you can spend time with people who are like-minded or going through similar stuff and have those discussions. Those sorts of things can be quite helpful, I think. Because I think a lot of people are maybe overwhelmed with information and not necessarily good information.
Support system is super important. If somebody comes to you and tells you that they are taking the medication, not to meet them with judgment. A few people have told me that they're on the medication. They said it with such like shame and embarrassment because they thought that I was going to judge them for using the medication. And I think that's really sad, because I think that fear is created by society's impressions of this medication and what people think is like right or wrong, and all of these moral values ascribed arbitrarily to things. But at the end of the day, it's just a medication that somebody needs to improve their health. And if someone has made the decision to improve their health with the help of medication, it's not appropriate for anyone to judge them for it. I get the same thing when I talk about my ADHD medication all the time. People think that it's like some weakness of will to use medication instead of just like gritting and bearing it or whatever. And it's stupid, because that shame, I think, stops people from seeking help to things that is readily available sometimes. And it's not fair.
But also, I think it's one of my biggest bugbears I have about the big wellness and actually a lot of the fitness industry in a way with certain groups is that they're like, oh, it's cheating it's like, but it's not though, is it? Because do you not think that people would choose a route that doesn't require this if it was easy and straightforward? Like, I'm pretty sure 99% of people don't love jabbing themselves in the leg once a week. To get to that point, you have to go through other phases of trying and failing to reach that point a lot of the time. And I think it's the same thing, like, if you just had surgery or whatever, and someone goes, oh, pain relief's cheating. No, like, are you stupid? It's not. It's just something, it's a tool there to help you get through to get to the end goal. And I think there's a lot of stuff that's perpetuated again, all big pharma. It's all those sort of things that really frustrate me about, like, why aren't we using all the tools we've got available to solve the problems? Like, why are we making it harder than it has to be? And that just frustrates me.
For sure. I think as well with medication, a lot of time people are like, oh, well, just try harder. But if someone's in pain because moving is difficult and then that's led to weight gain, they might not be able to do any exercise until they've lost some weight in the first place. And medication could be the thing that allows them to actually get out of the house and do things and build those habits. But those things might not be possible without the first bit.
I mean, that's also a really valid, point. And something that I've seen personally in like with family members and stuff is like, you're chronically ill. Actually, that leads to its own problems, because chronic pain, depression, eating, inactivity, actually, and then you're in this spiral anyway. And actually, this thing can stop you or can enable you to lose weight and feel better about yourself, because that's one of the things that's frustrating you, without having to, because you can't do this stuff. Actually, that's a really powerful tool to just make your suffering a bit less. So, why wouldn't we use it?
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully this was helpful for people. And if anyone is thinking about taking these medications, just go and talk to a qualified professional.
Yeah.
Because that is the best way you're going to get some real answers. James has actually set up a group.
Yeah, I thought it would be useful. It's on school. It's like a GLP1 support hub with a view to basically giving you place. I do like a regular Q&A, normally on a Monday at 11, but I'm doing this today. So if anyone's got any questions, they can ask and I'll answer them. or direct you to the most appropriate place to get the answer. And I'm also looking to kind of build some sort of educational bits in there as well around like managing training on the medication, nutrition on the medication, and also like a bit about life after GLP-1 if you're looking to come off it, how, that sort of stuff. So over time, I'm hoping it'll become a good resource for people.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. I'll share that in the show notes. So if anyone is interested, you can go find that. I'll also pop James's Instagram in the show notes. Do you want to tell everyone what your Instagram is?
Yeah, it's at James Lee PT. That's Lee.
Thank you so much for your time today, James. And I hope everyone enjoyed this. If you did, make sure to give me a 5-star review, or if you're on YouTube, just click like and subscribe. And I'll see you later.
Nice. Good chat.